Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Builder's Blueprint podcast. So glad that you right there, you listening to this, have clicked play. I am so glad that you are here. This is the podcast where we talk about building/rebuilding your life, and I share all the things, the strategies, the ways, the things that I have thought, the things that I have done when it comes to rebuilding my life, because I have rebuilt my life a few times. And I feel like now I have all of these things that I know that work, that if I needed to rebuild my life again from scratch, I could. And so my hope is that those of you who listen to this podcast might be able to take something away and apply it to your own life. Because remember, we're not just planning for the great, the wonderful, the amazing seasons. We're planning for the seasons where things go wrong and things fall apart and things go sideways and we have no idea where to turn or what to do next. And so when we have foundations and strategies that we build our life upon, it means that essentially we don't start from scratch anymore. We start from what we know and what we've learnt, and we can continue to move forward. So that is what this podcast is about. If that is you, if you are in a season of rebuilding, if you are in a season of, even if you're in a season of growth and you're like, now I finally have capacity to kind of work on things and really dig deep and understand myself a little bit more and develop strategies that are actually going to help me for seasons ahead where things might not be so great. Wherever you sit along that spectrum, this podcast is for you. So welcome in. I hope that you are locked in, ready for another episode. I don't know what I'm going to title this yet, but something along the lines of self-love, self-care, because that's what I'm talking about today. But as always, before we get into the juicy stuff of the episode, I wanted to share the highlight of my week. I've actually been waiting to tell you this. So I actually have two this week. We're going double whammy. First one is I last weekend went to the markets with a friend. Now, if you know me, you know that I am not a markets person. I think that it's hot, it's expensive, like temperature wise, like they're always like in the sun and there's no shade. They're expensive. They're things that like I could buy. Like I don't necessarily need any of these things, right? Unless it's fruit and veg. I understand that. It's like out of the way. It's not even like if I wanted to go there and do my grocery shopping, I could, because you can't get like I just think it's just not my thing. Okay. But I went because I was catching up with a friend and she loves going to the markets and I love hanging out with her. So I went, and I still don't love markets. Still not my thing. But what I realized from that experience is that I love doing things with my friends where we're out and we're doing something simple where we can talk and we can connect and we can be present with each other. And I just was reminded when I thought about how much I actually enjoyed being there and just connecting and sharing stories and talking, that I was like, life is not about chasing outcomes. It's not about chasing goals or the next thing. It's about building a life where you can have those things, but you can also you find joy in just being present, and you find joy in slowing down, and you find contentness in all of these things. It's like, it's not just about the grind and the hustle, which I know that we're moving away from grind and hustle culture, but I still have grind and hustle. I'm still here and I'm still working and moving towards the next thing. But I've also realized that it's not just about that. It's about the balance of softness and slowness and peace and joy, which we can find in these moments of connection. And I just realized how important they are to me. So that is my first highlight. My second highlight was also from the markets, but it's also my new obsession. And if you know me as well, you know that when I have a new obsession, everyone and their mum is going to hear about it. And so when we're at the markets, we had coconut matcha. you guys. So one of my other obsessions is FODMAP. If you don't know what FODMAP is, just Google it. It's the easiest way to understand it. And I was convinced that FODMAP, like coconut water is a high FODMAP food. And for whatever reason, I had in my head that coconut water is a high FODMAP food and it's one of my trigger foods. Okay. See what I mean? Like, if you don't understand, you need to go and understand what FODMAP is. It will change your life. And so I would never drink coconut water because I was like, I don't want to be sick. Anyway, that was like one of the options. And I was like, my friend was getting it and she was like, it's so good. And you know what? I was like, you know what? So what? I'd just be sick for a day. And I got it. And it was the best thing I have ever had. And I didn't get sick after. I didn't get sick, so much so that I was like, I need to test this out. So yesterday I went and I got another coconut matcha from a different place and it was amazing and I didn't get sick. So it is now officially my new favorite obsession. It's clearly not a high FODMAP. Whatever, maybe the matcha cancels it out. I did think that. Anyway, I don't know. But for whatever reason, it doesn't make me feel sick. So that's just wonderful. It is so good. The coconut just adds this really nice flavor to the matcha. I used to, when I would get like matcha with milk, I would have to get honey just to like enhance the flavor, right? I don't have to get it with coconut water. It's just so good and it's so refreshing, and it because it's clear, it doesn't dilute the green, so it's such a rich green color. Anyway, see what I mean? It's my new obsession. So welcome in. That's the highlights of my week. Let me know in the comments what your highlight of the week is. And if you are not already, make sure you're subscribed so you can keep hearing my highlights of my week and my new obsession. I'll also be obsessed with this for like 3 weeks and then I won't touch it again. Just FYI. So yeah, but welcome in. Welcome to the episode. We're going to get into now the juicy stuff where we're going to talk about self-love and self-care and what we can do in both of those areas. And the first thing I wanted to say was I feel like social media has made self-love and self-care super trendy, which is really great because we're more aware of how important both of these things are. But somewhere along the way, they've become two terms which are very interchangeable and often misunderstood. So self-care and self-love are just used interchangeably as if they mean the same thing, which they don't. And I'll explain in a minute the difference between them. But they've also been misunderstood to be this luxurious lifestyle with bubble baths, new manicures, wellness clubs, and buying new things. And that's actually not what self-love and self-care is. It's also kind of become this aesthetic lifestyle where you've got to be really routine based and you've got to be discipline based. And if you don't have those things, then you don't love yourself or you don't care for yourself. And again, while they're important things and they can help to add self-care, particularly to your life, they aren't requirements for self-love or self-care. So starting with self-love. Self-love is the internal state. It's the way that you perceive yourself. It is the way that you speak about yourself, and it's the way that you think about yourself. It's the way that you interpret your value and the way that you interpret your worthiness. But particularly before any achievement or before any kind of outcome. It's the way that you see yourself, and it's the way that you interpret mistakes, and it's your authenticity and the way that you can stick to your values. And so valuing yourself and seeing yourself as someone who is worthy of love and respect is someone who has self-love. And there's no prerequisites to self-love. You can learn to love yourself as a busy person, as someone who isn't confident, as someone who is at any stage of their career. You could be single, you could be in a happy relationship. There is no prerequisite to self-love and the journey of learning to love yourself. And I thought it would be helpful to have some examples of what self-love looks like, because I feel, well, the things that I get on my social media are things that I think misconstrue what what self-love is. And so an example might be a really high achieving student who always does well in tests, but then they fail, or they don't do as well as they would like to. And someone who has self-love tells themselves, it's all right, we all fail sometimes, you're still a really good student overall. Another example would be someone who forgets about catching up with a friend, me, and you feel terrible and you just feel so bad that you missed catching up with your friend. And you might show, if you're someone who shows yourself self-love, you might say like, everyone forgets things sometimes. I'm super forgetful sometimes, but I'm always forgiving when someone else forgets something. And so I'm going to be forgiving to myself as well. I'm still a good friend and I can still make it up to my friend. So that is what self-love can sound like or look like or feel like. It's that the way that you treat yourself, but it really comes down to that internal state of the way that you think about yourself. And now this differs from self-care, which is very much all about the external. Self-care is the external practices and routines and way that we treat ourselves that contribute and are an expression of our self-love. But self-care is not self-love, okay? And self-care is us nurturing the different aspects of our lives. So that can be physical, that can be emotional, it can be mental, it can be social, financial, spiritual. And it's the way that we do things to nurture each of these aspects. So they're the behaviors and the actions that help you take care of you. So these can be habits and they can be routines and they can be things that are, traditionally really praised on social media, and things like a really strict routine around sleep and around exercise and around nutrition, but they can also be things like rest and like boundaries and also your environment. I think that is something that I don't see a lot of talk about, but your environment and the way that you create your environment to be is such a practice of self-care. Because how many of you have ever been in a really messy room and you just can't think? It's like the practice of actually tidying your space, keeping your space organized and tidy. And this is coming from a type B gal. Like, I live alone, and people always ask me like, do you like living alone? And I'm like, yes, because I can leave the dishes in the sink for 3 days and no one is going to question me. Trust, it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen, right? But the practice of keeping my space tidy and organized and enjoyable is a way to nurture my brain, because I can think and I can be creative when my environment is nice and clean and organized. So the bottom line is that self-care is the behavior. It's the external things that we do to nurture ourselves. And self-love is the relationship. It's the internal stuff. It's the relationship that we have with ourselves. And we need both. We need self-love and we need self-care, especially when we're talking about building a life that you love and that you're proud of. You can't do that without both. Now, that's not to say that you can't get through life without self-love and without self-care. You can. Unfortunately, many, many people do it. But self-love and self-care makes working towards your goals, trying new things, balancing that hustle and grind with slowness and softness and peace, and building new relationship. It makes it all so much more meaningful, but it also makes it more easier. And who doesn't want a way to make life easier, right? It's because we're not coming from a place of trying to keep up and trying to pretend and trying to save face. When we do these things from a place of self-love and self-care, we're coming from a place of authenticity. We're coming from a place where like the reason we're doing this is to nurture ourselves, and that makes it more meaningful, and then you're more likely to put more energy and more effort and value on those things, and so then it becomes a snowball effect. So next I want to talk about self-love and what you can do to work on your relationship with yourself and loving yourself. And then I want to talk about self-care and some of the practical things that you can do to care for yourself and nurture yourself. And then to finish, I want to talk about the difference between self-love and ego as well. And then, I'll give you some pointers and some takeaways overall. So starting with self-love, the relationship you have with yourself, the key thing that I want you to take away from this is self-love, and that relationship with yourself of learning to love yourself takes time. It takes time. It also fluctuates. It's a relationship. So it is affected by all the other things going on in your world. It is affected by stress. It is affected by what's going on at work, what's going on in your relationships, what's going on at home, all these other things. It is affected by comparison. It is affected by failure. And so that is why it takes so long, because it is affected by all these things. And so it's so important to keep that in perspective, that it is not just a bubble bath. It is not a 30-minute moment in time that you experience this. It is this ongoing thing that you constantly need to be putting into in order to see the fruit of that. And so the way I think about it is that building a relationship with yourself is exactly the same as building a relationship with someone that you love. So the same approach that you use to building a new relationship with someone, whether that be romantic or platonic, or even like in the workplace, just people you do life with, the same way that you approach building that relationship, you need to use those strategies and that approach with yourself and building that loving relationship with yourself. You don't expect that you will love this person or you will care for this person after the first time that you see them or you hang out with them, right? We expect that, love at first sight is definitely a thing, but it is the love that develops over time. Love still develops over time. Right? So spending time with yourself, free from distractions, free from all of the things in this world that tug for your attention, spending time with yourself, learning about what you like, what you don't like, understand your patterns, understand the way that you think, listen inwardly. All of these things allow you to understand yourself better, appreciate yourself better, and love yourself better. And you've got to stay when it gets uncomfortable, because sometimes, as in any new relationship and building a new relationship, there are things where it's like, oh, that's a major ick. Whether it's romantic, platonic, anything, like there will be a time where you're like, oh, that's not for me. There will be things like that with you when you get to know yourself and you realize what you're like. But you've got to stay when it's uncomfortable. And that's not to say you've got to put yourself through really uncomfortable situations. You stay as long as you can, and then you go and you come back. But you got to keep coming back. That is the key. Another thing that I really like to think about when you're on this journey of learning to love yourself is, what are your love languages? How can you understand yourself using your love languages? For example, if one of your love languages, the way that you receive love, is words, how can you affirm yourself verbally? How can you take time to speak life into yourself? Mel Robbins has her like high five in the mirror and, say we're going to have a great day, I think. which is cool. I've tried it a few times and I do find it, I mean, I'm not a super words person when it comes to receiving love. However, I do find it a little bit like this is hard. It is hard. I'm not saying it's not good and it's weird. I'm saying it's actually really hard for me. But there's other things that you can do. You don't like, that's what I mean. Like, you don't need to force yourself to be uncomfortable. If you want to, you can, and force yourself to enjoy it. But you might write a letter to yourself, telling yourself all the things that you are proud of yourself for. You might just write a little sticky note of like, you're doing great, and put it on your fridge. Little things like that to affirm you verbally if you're someone that receives love verbally. If you are someone who is a quality time person, how can you spend time with yourself? How can you get to know the things that you like, the way that you think? How can you get to enjoy your own company? And now this quality time is one of my big love languages, and it has taken me years, but now I love a solo dinner date with myself. It is so nice. It's like I make it a whole process where I like get into something either comfy or nice depending on where I'm going, and then I just put my AirPods in and I'll listen to like a really fun podcast or some fun music, and then I'll get to the restaurant, take my AirPods out and just like soak in the atmosphere. I'll kind of check in with like how I'm feeling. I'm just like enjoying my being with myself and like just being by myself. And then I'll order like some food that like whatever I'm like feeling, always something really good because I am such a foodie. Order a drink if that's what I'm feeling like, and then just like really make the most of just this time, because we live in such a pressured world where we often don't get to spend time on our own with our own thoughts. And I used to think, I'm like, oh, it's a Pandora box. Once I kind of do that, it will be like the floodgates open and it'll just be like too much and too overwhelming. When I did it, I realized how enjoyable it was. So if you've been thinking about it for a while, just do it. It is not as scary as you think. The worst part is like the first 5 minutes. And then you realize like no one is looking and no one cares. And it's like you just start to like mind wander and drift, and it's really cool. Hot tip, if you're going to do something like this for the very first time, I would suggest, and you're really nervous about it, I would suggest going to somewhere that has like some sort of bar situation, whether that's like at a window or like at a bar, a literal bar, you know, like somewhere where you like it's normal for like one person to sit up. It just takes a little bit of the pressure off. So like however you can make it easy for yourself. Anyway, maybe I'll have to do a full episode on like taking yourself on dates, because it is something that like I used to never do. Like wouldn't catch me dead doing something like that. To now, I love it. I love it. I'll go to Yochi by myself. I'll go to dinner by myself. I'll go to coffee by myself. Like I love it, love it, love it. Anyway, back to self-love. If you're someone who has love language of touch, physical regulation is a really great one. So either whether that be movement or rest, is doing things that actively activate or rest, bring your body into a different state, like rest. The relationship that you build with yourself will start to bear fruit in all the other areas of your life. The work that you put into understanding yourself and learning to appreciate the things that you're good at and work on the things that you're not so good at and just enjoy your own company. The work that you put into all of that will start to show in all the other areas of your life, and you will always, always, always be grateful that you put the work in. Let us, that sounds so formal. Let's move on to self-care, which is where I want to talk about some more of the practical support and practical things that you can do to nurture yourself. And this is, again, I want to highlight where I think the idea of what self-care has been very misconstrued, because I know I think of self-care and I'm like, oh, I have to be doing nothing and I just have to be super relaxed and chill and I have to have got my nails done and I just have to be feeling like super zen. And for some people, that is exactly what they need. And at times we all need stuff like that. But that is not self-care doesn't equal those things. I got there in the end. However, those things can be a way of practicing self-care, but that is not the only things that self-care is, right? Self-care are the things that make your life easier, the things that make you feel cared for, the things that reduce friction in your life, the things that restore your energy, the things that create joy in your life. And maybe something came to you as I was reading that. Whatever that thing is, that engaging in that is a form of self-care. I always give this example to my students. When I was on placement in my last year of uni, I was on a full-time placement and I had really crazy hours. Like I would start at 5 in the morning and then sometimes I would finish at like 7 p.m. at night. So I had really long days. And so during the week I had no time. And I was also like running, like you're on placement. So you're just like running off adrenaline and you're like learning so much and so much is going on. So you're tired, you're exhausted. And for me, in that time of my life, meal prepping good, wholesome food that I could have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the week was a form of self-care. Because one, if I didn't have it during the day, like there was no capacity really for me to like go and get something proper to eat, like it would just be something snacky on the go. But then secondly, because I was working such long hours on placement, I didn't have like I was so tired. So and I couldn't like come home and like start just cooking up food. And so having that food prepared to just like put in the microwave, eat, and then go straight to bed was such a form of self-care for me, because without it, I would have just started to unwind very, very quickly. I was tired. If I wasn't eating properly, that just adds another layer of the stress and pressure that your body is under and doesn't have the fuel to handle that. So I always give that example of like, it's not something that we would typically go, oh yeah, that's self-care. But for me, nurturing my body through such a stressful period was actually meal prepping good, wholesome food on the weekend. Other examples are moving your body, getting really good sleep, perfecting your sleep hygiene routine, having boundaries, saying no, which is, we all struggle with that. Celebrating your wins, doing small things that make you outrageously happy, like drinking coconut matcha for me right now. But it's the little things that make your life easier, that make you feel cared for, that make you feel joy, right? And it's the same as when we love other people. We do these things with no expectation of return or no expectation that, like they owe us, or that they're going to live their life any differently because we've now given them these things. We need to apply that same logic to us, right? When we care for ourselves and nurture ourselves, it's not so we can then work harder and faster and more. It's so that we can just be rest and feel cared for and feel loved, right? Like we don't do these things so that we can then give ourselves something in return, or like, we then expected to live our lives any differently. No, that's what I mean by like, there's no prerequisite to self-love and self-care. You don't, just because you love yourself or you nurture yourself and care for yourself doesn't mean you need to like own a 6-figure business and be like at the gym every day and like only eat whole foods. Like that doesn't mean you have to live your life any differently. You can still live your life exactly how you feel like is right. It's literally a practice of being like, you're worth loving. And then when we teach ourselves, it's obviously, bleeds into other areas of our lives, and it changes the way we see love and the way that we receive and accept love from other people, and the bar that we set for love as well. So bottom line is, self-care is about supporting yourself. Now, the last thing I want to briefly talk about is the difference between self-love and ego. And healthy ego, or what we would call self-love and what we've been talking about, allows us to genuinely appreciate our strengths, accept our imperfections, and love ourselves unconditionally. It allows us to be grounded, honest, secure, accept imperfections, and it doesn't require validation. When we love ourselves and we care about ourselves, we don't need to be validated by anyone else. And an unhealthy ego at times can actually really look like self-love. On the surface, a good unhealthy ego that has been constructed very carefully and well can look exactly like self-love. But the difference is it is a shell. It is just on the outside. It looks great. It looks exactly the same as self-love. But underneath, there is fear, there is unhealthy patterns, and there is anxiety. It's performative, it's approval driven, it's fragile, it's fear-based, it's image over truth when it is ego over self-love. And so an example is if someone asks you for your opinion, the difference between self-love and ego is that someone with self-love would express what you actually thought, no matter what anyone else thought. Someone with ego would say what they think the other person wants to hear, so they feel validated. That is the difference between someone with self-love and someone where it's just an ego. It's just an outer shell with no substance beneath. So self-love tells the truth, but ego just tells an impressive version. So that is self-love, self-care. I hope that through this episode, you have had either a confirmation or a light bulb moment where you can walk away either knowing, you know what, I actually do love myself and I need to take time to appreciate and be so proud of myself for this relationship that I have with myself. Or maybe you had a light bulb moment where you're like, you know what, I actually have some ego. I actually don't really take time to care for myself properly without expecting something in return. So whatever it was for you, I hope that you walk away and that you actually action it and do something about it, because it is all well and good for me to yap on here and for you to listen. But if you don't take that and actually do something with it, it becomes void. And we don't want that. So let me know. Either send me a message, send me a DM, leave a comment, whatever you want to do. And let me know what you thought. And yeah, that is all for today's episode. I'm not really good at wrapping these things up, so I guess I'll just say goodbye and see you next week. Remember, there is no limit when it comes to building a life that you love and that you are proud of. Love you lots. See you next week. Bye.